The Bridge Code of Jewish Law. We are chapter 87, up to number 21, but we'll briefly just recap 20. So we'll get the flow. Okay. So we left off last time that we said we can close animals in a coop that they go back to their coop or cage at night. So one of the things that we can't do on Shabbos is trap animals. Right? We can't trap animals. When they built the Mishkan, they had various animals that they used the skins. The most unique was the tachash. The tachash is extinct. There's no so therefore there's no English translation. But the tachash was like a rainbow color. It was multicolored skin. Because it was so beautiful, unfortunately, it was hunted into extinction. But they trapped animals, and they used also to trap some sea creatures. That they used for example, the techelis. The techelis was a blue wool, and they used the blood of a certain fish in the dye. So there was quite a bit of trapping. So therefore, trapping, as we know, the 39 malachas, the 39 techniques that we can't do on Shabbos, they are the 39 techniques that were used to build the Mishkan, the tabernacle in the wilderness. So as they trapped, we can't trap. So we said that if there's we've got an undomesticated animal and it goes back into its own little cage or coop, so the chickens go into their coop at night, or maybe you have a dog that comes into the house and has this little bed in the laundry or something, whatever happens to be, you're allowed to close the door behind these animals. That's not considered trapping. But if they're not trained to return to their little place, they don't go in, or even if they usually do, but right now they're going through a rebellious period, and therefore they're not going to where they're meant to go, then we can't close them in on Shabbos, because that would be trapping. So that was the brief recount of where we left off last week. So Chaf Aleph, number 21. Okay. If they're already trained and they're domesticated and they return home in the evening, but they went out. So normally they do come home, right? So I'll just use the example of the chickens, because we have some chickens in the backyard. They normally go into their coop at night. That's what they always do. But it happened to be that tonight they didn't. Now, and you're worried that if you leave them outside, they're going to get stolen. Now, not so much worried about the chickens getting stolen in the backyard, more worried about them getting eaten. But I guess that's also stolen, just by something different. So therefore, you can give them a little nudge. You can push them into their protected space. Aval, however, you can't pick them up in your hands, because they're muksa. Right? Animals are muksa on Shabbos. So you can give it a little, push with your foot or something else. You give it a push back into its protected area, but you can't actually pick it up. Okay. Cough base number 22. Right? You can't deliver baby animals on Shabbos. I know everyone was planning to this week, but I'm sorry to let you down. So we can't deliver baby animals on Shabbos. But Phil Asada, you can't even assist. what's assisting me? Even to take hold of the child as it's being born, so it doesn't drop to the ground. I guess like if a horse gives birth or various things, they're standing up and worry about the animal dropping. We can't also, so we can't even catch the animal on the way down. All right. That's another advantage of chickens. They lay the eggs themselves. You don't have to assist with the birthing.
Rabbi, can I ask you one question, quick question?
Yes.
If someone is in a tree, a young child climbed up the tree and it's about ready to fall, can you come and catch the child on Shabbos or no?
Well, yes. So first of all, we can't climb a tree on Shabbos.
But
I understand, but sometimes kids are kids, and I presume you're talking about a human child now.
Yeah, no, I think
yes,
she's
a human
asking.
child. That's what I mean.
Forget about whether or not he was allowed to.
So he's not allowed to, but
she is asking.
Kids do that.
If you see a baby in a tree,
sometimes
what are you allowed to do on Shabbos?
Yeah. But sometimes kids
just to save it.
Do things they're not meant to do. So what can you do? Well, obviously it's going to depend now on the age and the situation. If you're worried about the child's gone up quite high, and chas v'shalom, God forbid, their life's at risk. You can jump up and go get them if need be. But for sure, you could catch them if you need to. Children aren't muktzah. We said the animals are muktzah, but children aren't muktzah on Shabbos. So you can pick up your kids, give them a hug. They're not muktzah during the week either. So it's good things to do. Give your kids a hug and pick them up. And grandkids. And if you have great grandkids, yeah. Okay. Chav Gimel, number 23. An animal cuts itself. It's got some type of sore or cut, an injury. And it happened on Shabbos. So sachin oisa b'shemen, you can put oil on it or whatever other ointments, whatever it needs. And that we said, not only it happened on Shabbos, but the animal's also suffering for it. If it's a little scratch and the animal doesn't care, then we'll leave it till after Shabbos. But if it's something that's bothering the animal, we can attend to it. Avol b'soif, but if it's healing, what's at the it happened before Shabbos and was the end of the story. So now putting the oil on it is just make the animal feel good. It doesn't actually, it's not for the healing. So therefore we're not allowed to, right? Because again, the animal's muktzah on Shabbos. So when it's the beginning of the wound or it's some type of wound warning that's going to get infected, then we have a mitzvah saba l'chaim. We're not allowed to let an animal suffer. So therefore we can attend to it. But if it's not, if what you're going to do is not going to prevent suffering, it's just, it feels a little bit nicer. You give a bit of attention as it's healing. Then we need to leave that till after Shabbos. Okay, 24. And then we're finished with the animals for a while. Im achal kashinan hardeg gedaima amidst the eris. It ate a lot of vetch. Vetch is some type of a bean that cattle eat. And it's just an example, but the animal ate the vetch, or any other animal ate whatever else it eats, and they've got a bit of a stomach ache, right? So they're in discomfort. You can trot it around the yard to exhaust it, so to help it recuperate. Right? This is what it needs to, it gets like a gas buildup or something. The horse equivalent of burping a baby. So we can do that. Now, if it's literally its blood is being helped, it's got some type of increase in blood. You can make it stand in water, and this cools the animal down. And if it's a doubt, you don't know, does it really have this, or is it going to help? It's a doubt. Thomas, that now you got a doubt that maybe the animal needs bloodletting, otherwise it could die. You're allowed to tell a non-Jew to let the animal's blood. Likewise with other remedies. If the animal really needs on Shabbos, we can ask a non-Jew to do it. We can do whatever remedies that the animal needs through a non-Jew. So that's our chapter on animals. Any questions, thoughts, comments before we start the next chapter? No? Okay. All right. Simon Peiches, chapter 88.
Oh, I asked my question while I was on Zoom. I'm sorry.
You're on mute. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
I'm
What was
mute.
your question?
But the question was, why are we not allowed to catch the newborn? Maybe he's going to fall on a hard stone or a sharp stone and injure himself or something.
The animal, normally they're giving birth in the barn.
The animal, the newborn animal.
Yeah, normally your domesticated animal is giving birth in the barn. So there's lots of nice straw there. But, I guess if it was for whatever reason you were traveling or
Sometimes
something.
they're in the pasture,
So the animals that live in the pasture really are much better at giving birth themselves. But look, yeah, perhaps if there was a situation where you're worried that there is a danger to the animal, for sure you could ask a non-Jew to help. But here we're talking about, it's normally the animals give birth in the barn. You're not worried about the animal dying. It's more just a matter of assisting.
Okay. So
Rabbi,
they had barns in those days. They had barns too.
Yeah.
I thought they lived in tents. I thought.
They've had barns for a long time. Even have farms for a long time.
Okay.
and animals used to give birth without the help of man. So
Yes, and
So-
usually they do. But there are times where the odd times they need some human assistance.
Yeah.
So if you're worried about the animal falling, you just put some hay underneath the.
Yep. Yeah. Put something underneath it.
Let the baby fall onto the hay.
Yeah.
Right.
Its fault.
That's right. Yeah.
And by the way, the Chumash tells us that the animals had houses.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, they had sukkahs or something like that. That's right.
Sukkos.
That's right. Okay. The chapter 88. We'll give a brief introduction, even though we've actually probably said this introduction at least once, maybe twice, as we just to explain other things. The idea of muksa. So muksa is not biblical. Muksa is a rabbinic decree, but like many rabbinic decrees, it was made in biblical times. Right? It's from First Temple period. And the idea of muksa is to put a fence around the Torah. So for an example, I always give the example of a pen, right? Although they didn't have pens like we have today, they used feathers or reeds. But, we're not allowed to write on Shabbos. Writing is one of the malachas. It's one of the 39 techniques, and they used it in the Mishkan. They used to put the beams. They put the first beam had an aleph on one side and a base on the next side. So then the beam that they put next to it, they put the aleph next to the aleph, and then a base next to the base, and the next one was had a base and then a gimel, and that's what they had. So that way each beam went into the exact same spot each time. Right, so that was how they used to write. So you're not allowed to write on Shabbos. Now, if you're allowed to play with a pen, then what happens is, as you're, playing with a pen, let's say you're allowed to, and biblically you can just sort of fiddle with a pen in your fingers. You might absent-mindedly start writing, jot something down. In which case, God forbid, person has biblically transgressed Shabbos. So the sages said, and again, this is in First Temple period, anything that doesn't have a purpose on Shabbos. So for example, a pen, because since you can't write, there's no purpose. You can't even move. You can touch it in theory, as long as you can touch it without moving it, but you can't move it, you can't pick it up. So that way, what will happen, the person absent-mindedly picks up the pen, and then he says, whoops, and he puts it down. He didn't do anything. If he's allowed to play with the pen, hold the pen, then God forbid the whoops is he's written on Shabbos. He's transgressed Shabbos. If he can't even pick it up, then if he has a little whoops, he does something absent-mindedly, all they did was touch something that technically you can, and that has then put a fence keeping us one step away from breaking Shabbos. So that's the theory behind it. Any questions? No?
Not a question, but an interesting comment. You said that a siyug is d'Rabbanan.
Yes.
And I say, I'm sorry, I just managed to get home. There is one siyug that is d'oraisa that I found, that I expounded on it for 10 years. And there's one that the Torah tells you right outright. Here's a siyug. And which one is it? I'll pose it to the class. The pasuk says, Midvar sheker tirchayk. Doesn't say don't lie. It doesn't say don't do it. It says stay far away. And
Right.
that came in handy with me as a lawyer, because I could say this, I could say that, like tirchayk. They're telling you don't look to fudge it.
Yeah, we have to stay far away from any. No, that's true. It's not so much offensive like in this case, but it's more that even something that's remotely dishonest. So good point. But here, this one is rabbinic. So there's different types of muksa. So another type. So for an example, so there's things like a pen that their primary purpose they have no purpose on Shabbos, because you can't do what they made for. Okay, another example are things, let's say you could use it technically on Shabbos, but you wouldn't. So I give an example: a shechting knife. A knife that we use for kosher slaughter. Now, although in theory you could cut an apple with it, but since when you shecht and you slaughter an animal, it has to be perfectly smooth, and the shofet spends hours smoothing it, making sure it's in the right condition. You're not going to use it for anything else, because the person not going to use it for anything else, because it can damage it. So even though in theory you could use something else, a knife has plenty of purposes on Shabbos, but since this knife has been put aside for a special purpose, so that it also becomes muksa. And we're going to mention other types of muksa as well as we go through. It's going to be reasonably long.
Rabbi, can I ask you one thing? When you say the word muksa, you mean forbidden?
So muksa means an object that you can't move on Shabbos,
Okay.
right? So rabbinically, you can't move it. So again, for example, a pen, since you're not allowed to write on Shabbos, you can't move it. Can't move the pen. Your car, right? You can touch the car because normally when you touch it, it's not going to move. It's rather heavy. Unless you got one of those alarms that, there's the slightest touch and off it goes, and then we can't touch it for another reason, but you can't move it. So anything that we can't use for its purpose on Shabbos, you can. But then we have things that have a primary purpose and a secondary purpose. So I'll give you an example, a hammer. So the primary purpose of a hammer is building. You hammer in nails, which of course you can't do on Shabbos. But then there's a secondary purpose. People might use a hammer to break open a coconut or or a walnut or something. And it's reasonably accepted thing for people to hit their coconut with a hammer. So in that case, you're allowed to use it for its secondary purpose, even though its primary purpose is problematic. Then there are certain things that it depends on how we viewed it before Shabbos. So again, another example. Let's say a rock. Now, a rock has no purpose on Shabbos. What are you going to do with a rock? So if you encounter a rock, it's muksa. However, someone might have a rock that they use as a doorstop. So they decided before Shabbos that this is now a doorstop. They've given it a purpose. So now you're allowed to move it on Shabbos, this rock. As you open and close your door, you can move the rock to put it in place because your intention gave it a purpose on Shabbos. Likewise, you might have a piece of 2x4 that you used to hold open a window. So normally it would be muksa because it's a building material. But before Shabbos, since before Shabbos you gave it a purpose with your intention, so now it's no longer muksa. So we'll go in more detail, but this is just some of the ideas that we're going to come across.
Rabbi,
Yes.
I heard a very interesting question regarding muksa. What happens if you have an esrog and your esrog becomes invalidated? It becomes puzzle on Yontif. But you have other esrogs that are hanging in your sukkah as a decoration, and those are muksa. So now
Yes.
what do? You have a muksa esrog that you can use to bench lulav and esrog, and benching lulav and esrog is a mitzvah from the Torah. So the mitzvah from the Torah overrides the muksa of not taking your decoration esrog and using that to say a bracha on lulav and esrog.
Yes, that's what would happen, though. Hopefully you'd be able to borrow from someone else. And I say, if with what esrog costs, you've got half a dozen just hanging from your ceiling, then we really need to have a talk.
Even one.
That's
Then
right.
you should have put one to the side.
That's right. Thank God for plastic fruit. One of my childhood memories is in the shul. We used to, before sukkahs, come and hang on all this fruit in the sukkah to decorate it. And then, often Shabbos is midway through sukkahs and you'd go into the sukkah for kiddush and everything was rotting and full of flies and it reeked. It was, anyway.
I think the circumstance was in order to show how a mitzvah from the Torah overrides muksa, which is a mitzvah
Yes.
from the rabbis.
Yes.
That was the whole
That's
point
correct.
of
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
exercise.
no, 100%. That's going to be correct. That and there'll be other times that muksa is overruled. For healing. Someone's not well. We'll discuss as we get there. Aleph, number one. Muksa Madas. something that became muksa because you put your mind to it. In other words, it's not muksa in of itself, but your intention made it muksa. I'm going to give an example. There's something that you decided that you're not going to eat on Shabbos because it's not really fit for eating. Only, you know, it's not ideal. So I don't know what you know, this could be different for different people. You know, so you know, it could be something. There's a certain food that maybe it's better if it's cooked. You could eat it raw, but you decided before Shabbos that, you know, you don't like it raw. You're not eating it. That's for sure. You're not having it. Or it is able to be eaten, no problems. But you put it aside for stock. You know, you sell, you know, you make preserves and jellies and you sell them. And so even though you could eat this on Shabbos, it's perfectly ready to eat, that you set it aside for sale. It's stock. So since you made that decision before Shabbos, and even though it's even if you put it in storage, you know, put it in your regular storage. Likewise, something that is fitting today for a dog to eat. So let's say raw meat. You know, you're not going to eat raw meat yourself, but you might give it to a dog to eat. Now, even though it was not intended before Shabbos to be eaten, this raw meat, you're going the haim of the oiv and Shabbos, for example, an animal that died on Shabbos. So these are all the things that were mentioned that are muksa. So normally dog food is not muksa, right? Because you can feed it to dogs. But here the animal died on Shabbos. So it wasn't like you had in mind to serve this raw meat to the dog before Shabbos. Likewise, something that changed from what it was yesterday, right? It took on a new form. You know, I know it melted. Something, I know something happened. But still, today it's suitable for something. You're going, for example, you had a bowl and it broke. And even though it's not suitable to the same extent as it was before, but you could use this shard. There's a large enough piece that you could put something in it if you wanted to. So it can be used sort of along the same lines as what you did. Likewise, bones that are stripped from meat today. So you had a bone, you know, and everyone ate the meat. They had a nice roast with a bone or something, or steak. But the bone, it can be given to a dog. So all of these things, even though you didn't have intention to use it, Kol Eila Maton L'Taltel Shabbos, they can all be handled on Shabbos, chutz, unless it will accept something that you rejected with your hands. Doesn't have to be with your hands literally. So for example, you had dates or raisins or something, and you particularly put them aside to dry. So you put them off totally out of your mind, and you start the drying process. So those you can't handle. But all these other things, even though there's some reason why you think there might be muksa, you set aside these preserves for sale, but you're allowed to change your mind and take some. Or this raw meat, you can feed it to the dog, even though you wouldn't eat raw meat. All these things can still be handled on Shabbos. Okay. Base number 2. Again, don't forget, people have questions, just let me know. You have things that they can't be eaten at all by people. As they are, even through difficulty. Why? They need cooking. So now let's say what's something you can't eat raw at all besides meat?
Potato.
Yeah, potato. Good. It's a good example. Here we've got a potato. So there are certain vegetables or things that we might prefer to cook. It tastes better, but you could eat it if you had to. But the potato, you're not really going to eat it raw. Now, that even if this food might be suitable for various animals or dogs, since this is meant to be eaten by people afterwards, right? So it's not raw. It's not a raw bone that you set aside for a dog. This is something that you're planning for humans to eat. Just at the moment, you can't eat it. So therefore, it's not set aside for animals. So let's give another example. Although we said, you have some leftover bones or something, and you're going to, that's a dog can chew on that. But let's say you had some top of the range, super expensive steak. So you've decided that you're going to eat this after Shabbos, right? It's raw now. You can't eat it now. We'll set aside. You're having a barbecue Saturday night or Sunday or something like that, and you have no intention, even though a dog could technically eat it and might very well enjoy it, but this has been taken out of animal food situation and has been designated for people at a later date. So therefore, it's not considered animal food anymore, and therefore it's muksa. It can't be handled on Shabbos. Likewise, the varim she'enim roim b'Shabbos tashmish, things that cannot be used at all. They have no purpose on Shabbos. Going, for example, eitzim, you have wood, the noitza shel oifus, or feathers, bird feathers. What? There's no purpose on Shabbos. The oidus behemoths, or animal skin. So we're not talking about animal skin that's been made into leather that you can use for various things. Just regular animal. Before it's been processed. But seme or pishton or wool or flax that hasn't been processed, it's just you can't do anything with it. And all animals, even if they're in your house. Nutshells. Or eggshells. But some is kosher, or very hard bones that even a dog can't do anything with them. Or you've got doors or windows, and we're not talking about ones attached to your house. Just it's building materials, doors, window frames, whatever happens to be. V'chein shivrei kalim she'einam roim oilish tashmish, or broken utensils that there's nothing you can use them for anymore. It's just little shards of glass or something, you know, or porcelain. There's nothing you can do with it. All of these and anything similar to them, asurim b'tiltul, you cannot handle them on Shabbos. Exception, mikol mokin, nevertheless, kli zechuchas, glassware, which broke, and it's in a place where someone could get hurt. You're allowed to remove the pieces. And likewise, not only glass, maybe if it was, crockery or something, anything that could be sharp. So although it's muksa, we're going to see that one of the places that muksa doesn't apply is if it's dangerous. It's going to be dangerous. So someone dropped the glass, and there's little bits of glass on the floor. You don't, even though those pieces are technically muksa, you don't have to leave them all over the kitchen, because God forbid someone's going to step on it or cut themselves. You're allowed to sweep it up and remove them. And but other than that, if it's not a dangerous situation, then anything that has no purpose, it can't be used for anything. This is considered muksa, and therefore it can't be handled.
Rabbi,
Yes.
I had friends of mine years ago that bought a dog and named the dog Muksa.
Just to remind them, huh? Just to remind them.
Yeah.
Not bad. Not a bad way to remember. It's and that's quite Jewish tradition. That's why challah is called challah. Right? It's used to be in Europe, the people used to buy bread from a bakery during the week, but for Shabbos they baked their own bread. And since they weren't baking regularly, there was concern they would forget to take the challah. Right? It's a piece that we need to take out of the dough. Technically, it goes to the kohen, but today we can't do that, so we burn it. But they were concerned people would forget, so they called the Shabbos bread challah. So as the people are saying, "Oh, I'm making challah," every mention of the word reminds them that they had to take this challah from the dough, this piece of the dough. So the muksa dog, that's it's a good way to remember. Fine Jewish tradition. Okay. So, brief introduction to the next one. There are certain things that we can't eat. Let's say it's not kosher to eat, but you could have other benefit from it in a different way. And then there are certain things that are forbidden, not only forbidden to eat, but you can't even have any benefit from it. So I'll give an example. You have an animal that wasn't shechted. It just it dropped dead or got killed another way, whatever. So you're not allowed to eat it, but you can have other benefit. You can sell it to a non-Jew to eat, or to the dog food factory, whatever happens to be, and you can take the money. You can have benefit. You can feed it to your dog. You can make a couch or shoes from the leather from the skin. I know you can. Yes.
But not on Shabbos. You
No,
can't.
not on Shabbos. I'm talking about in general.
Not,
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that.
sorry about that.
No, I'm sorry I wasn't clear. Thank you. I'm just speaking generally about food that you can't, about not kosher food. There are certain foods that are not kosher, but you can have other benefit from it. So you could have a restaurant that sells fried shark, right? You can't eat it yourself, but you can sell it to non-Jewish people, and they can enjoy their delicious shark, and etc.
Are you responsible for the fact that Jews might come into your restaurant?
You'd want to make sure that Jews don't, and therefore many people don't invest in non-kosher food enterprises for that reason, because unfortunately, not every Jew knows what they should and shouldn't be having. But in concept, you're allowed to have full benefit from it. Just can't eat it. Then there are other types of food, and I'll give some example in a moment. There's certain food that not only are you not allowed to eat, you're not allowed to have any benefit from it whatsoever. So an example is chametz on Pesach. So you can sell your leaven, your chametz before Pesach. You can buy it back after Pesach. But any chametz, any leaven that was owned by a Jew on Pesach, no Jew is allowed to have benefit from that ever. So you have to destroy it, essentially. Burn it, or destroy it some other way. Break into crumbs, throw it in the ocean. Another example is a cooked mixture of milk and meat. So someone, poured a gallon of milk into their chicken soup, God forbid, to their beef soup. So they're making a beef soup, and they now not only can we not eat it, we can't have any benefit. So you can't sell it to a non-Jew, even though if the non-Jew made it himself, he's allowed to eat it. But you can't have benefit. So you can't even give it to the non-Jew because you've given him something, it did him a favor, he owes you a favor. So you can't, again, that would be benefit. Even feeding it to a stray dog, person's going to feel good about themselves that they took care of this stray animal, and that's also a benefit. So a mixture of milk and meat that was cooked together, it can't have any benefit whatsoever. Another example would be if the food was used for idol worship. I don't know, maybe someone worshipped this burger. They got excited. Not only that Burger King, they had Burger God, God forbid, whatever. They worshipped the burger. Now that since it's been worshipped, a Jew can't have, well, not only Jews, non-Jews also, can't have any benefit from this item ever. So these are all examples of food that not only you can't eat, you can't have benefit. So most non-kosher, even though you can't eat it, you're allowed to have benefit. This is why in, let's say, in a commercial abattoir, for example, if they're going to shecht 500 chickens an hour, which is pretty much the norm in commercial, some shaitim can shecht well over 1,000 an hour, but they don't allow it because of mistakes. People start rushing, so they normally keep the 500 chickens per hour. So they're going all day. They got however many shaitim all working. They got let's say 10 guys working, 500 an hour, 5-hour shift. That's a lot of chickens, and there's going to be some, either the shchit had a problem, or they find that it had some problems with its inner organs, so it wasn't kosher, or once it's feathered, they see that it had certain injuries. And so at a large commercial place, they have a big box, or in the huge places, they have like a dumpster, and any problematic ones get put into there. And at the end of the day, they sell it to a non-Jewish, a wholesaler. So the whole thing wholesale. So even though they were problematic, so we're not allowed to eat them ourselves, you can have benefit from it. You sell it, no problems. Again, and then there's food that you can't have. So we're going to see on Shabbos, there's going to be a difference between these two types of non-kosher food. So Gimel, number 3. You have food, it's forbidden to eat, but you're allowed to have benefit. Okay, so let's just give an example. A chicken that wasn't shechted, it just died. And a non-Jew is allowed to eat it as is. or can eat it as is. Kugoyim, for example, basar malbushal kugoyim. So this chicken that died, it also got cooked, right? So you have, it's edible. We're allowed to have benefit. We can't eat it, we can have benefit, but a non-Jew could eat it as is. It's ready to go. The yachol who lit the goy, and you could give it to a non-Jew if you wanted to. Shushaloi. And since it's yours, you can give it to the person, give it away. Therefore, mutal taltaloi, it's allowed to be handled on Shabbos. So even though you can't eat it, even though you don't have any purpose for it on Shabbos yourself, but since you could give it to someone and they could eat it, could give it to a non-Jew and they could eat it, you're allowed to handle on Shabbos. So you can move it out of the way, you can whatever with it. Avol, however, if it's not edible, it's not fitting for the non-Jew right now, going for example, basachai, it's a raw chicken. So right now, he can't eat it. And it's also not for dogs, it's not fit because it's food designated for humans. Or you're not able to give it to a non-Jew if it's not actually yours. So you couldn't give it away. So even though you could give it, even though in theory something could be given away, but you don't own it. So you can't give it away, you can't give away something that's not yours. It belongs to someone else. Then also the taltaloi, then you can't handle it on Shabbos. So let's just sum this up. A food that you're not allowed to eat, it's not kosher, but you're allowed to have benefit from. And it's usable as is. And it's yours. So you could give it to a non-Jew if you wanted to, because it's yours. Then if you have all of those conditions, it's not muksa. You can handle it, you can move it. Because it has a purpose on Shabbos. You can give it to the non-Jew, and you made someone happy, and you gain out of that. Peaceful relations, etc. However, if it's something that you can't have benefit from, or it's not ready to eat, or it doesn't belong to you, so you can't give it away, any of these factors would now mean that you can't handle on Shabbos, and therefore it's mukta and you can't do anything with it. Okay. Any questions? No? All right, brief introduction to the next one. There's a concept called noilid. Literally means something that's born. So it didn't exist, or at least it didn't exist in its current form before Shabbos. So an example would be an egg that gets laid on Shabbos. So it wasn't available when Shabbos began, and now it's come into existence. For many of us, those who don't have chickens, another example would be mail that's delivered on Shabbos. Right? You didn't have access to it before Shabbos, and now it is, or a package that gets delivered. Okay, so Dalet number 4. Noilet. And it defines, Vahaino, this is something, it came into being today. You're going, for example, what happened? A non-Jew cleaned out the oven and you got ashes. Right? So people used to collect the pile of ashes. They used to use it for to cover things or messes and different things. But here it's new. Likewise, an egg that was laid today. But mine is a cholim and alonos, or sap that was running from trees. the May Nissen during the spring. Right? So I don't know if we have anyone living in Canada, but the maple syrup was just running out, leaking out of the trees. Or even something that it didn't come to existence today, but it came of a result of something you're not allowed to do today. So this example, like the mail, we can't transport it from wherever it came from, but it came. So any of these things that Shayasum today, where I came for the action that we can't do. I could go in, for example, you have fruit, they fell off the tree. Now, you can't pick them, but it fell off the tree itself. So since you can't pick it, it's like it became available through an action that we're not allowed to do. Or a non-Jew picked the fruit on Shabbos. Or milk that was milked on Shabbos. Gam kain asurim b'tiltul. All of these things are muksa, and we can't handle them on Shabbos. We can after Shabbos, but not on Shabbos. Now, if there was bread that a non-Jew baked in a city that's majority non-Jewish, so therefore he had intention to bake it for a non-Jew. If there's urgent situation, or mitzvah, or you need to do a mitzvah, then you can eat this bread on Shabbos. I will just point out a few side things. This is a theoretical. In practice, today, all bread, unless it's deliberately made kosher, pretty much all bread is non-kosher, because they use oils, which are usually an animal-vegetable blend, either in the bread itself or to grease the pans so it doesn't stick. The commercial bread is 99.9% of the time going to be absolute non-kosher, because it's going to be contaminated with animal fat. So people mistakenly think, they go to a supermarket and they can just buy bread. After what's bread? Flour and water. They don't realize that it's been contaminated by animal fats, and it's not listed in the ingredients because it was only used to grease the tray. Used to grease the tray, so it's not listed in the ingredients. I think I've shared with you before. A friend of mine was asked to give a rabbinic certification, kosher certification, to a candy for Pesach. So we asked them for a list of ingredients. They sent them the list of ingredients. The ingredients were all fine, but obviously before he gives the certification, he has to go to the factory and check out the actual process. So he goes to the factory, and this candy was a chewy center covered by chocolate covered gooey stuff. So in the process, the gooey center comes out of a drop of thing and lands on a conveyor belt. And as it's going along the conveyor belt, and it's hot at the moment, it was sprinkled with a white powder, and then it dropped into the chocolate. So he asked them, what's the white powder? And they said, it's flour. So this is absolute chametz now, because you've got a hot, liquidy. So he says, why didn't you put it in the list of ingredients? And innocently, they weren't trying to be scammers. They just didn't understand. They said, it's not an ingredient. It's just to help it hold its shape until it falls into the chocolate. So for them, in their mind, it was an ingredient. It was just like part of the process. So similarly, a lot of these products that are, made in a lot of these bread products, that they use this to grease the pans. It's this mixture of vegetable and animal oils. They're not listed ingredients, not ingredients, just something to, so it doesn't stick. So generally speaking, you really need to make sure that all bread has a reliable kosher certification. But in the old days, bread was just flour and water. People made a sourdough and they baked it. So that's what it's talking about.
Rabbi, why isn't, if a person would think, gee, that could be batal b'shishim, it's nullified 1 in 60 because it's just a tiny amount of animal fat. Why isn't that working in this case?
First of all, not necessarily. It's not necessarily bottled 60 times. Second of all, you can't make things nullified on purpose. So nullified is only after the fact. So just to give it a simple example, the drop of milk spilled into the chicken soup, God forbid. You got this massive pot of soup, was one little tiny drop, was totally accidental. You got about 500 times the amount of chicken soup in this drop of milk. So we say it becomes nullified. But something like this, which is done on purpose, that's number one. But the biggest issue here is that if it was put into the mixture, so, and I gave the example of milk and chicken soup. In other words, they're both liquids. So it totally, disperses in the other liquid. That's when something becomes nullified. But here, it's not put in the mixture of the dough. It's in concentrate on the outside pieces. So it's absorbed in its full strength in part of the bread. And so since it's all one entity, that's the issue there. So it doesn't really become nullified. Just an interesting case while we're talking about things becoming nullified. So in Australia, when it comes to the 7-Eleven Slurpees, so they won't give the recipe to the kosher organizations. So therefore they can't certify it. Huh? Nevertheless, the two largest cities, Sydney, they rule that it's you can eat them, and in Melbourne they rule that you can't. Ironically, the heads of the two kashrut authorities are brothers, and each one say they base their ruling on their father's ruling. And of course, they share the same father. So at first glance, that seems odd, and the Jewish newspapers had quite a few good comics about that. But why did it happen that way? They said like this. In Melbourne, which has, although it's a similar amount of Jews in Sydney and Melbourne, but Melbourne has a far larger religious community. And therefore, they felt that when someone wants to make something kosher, they're taking the kosher market into account. So for sure, if there's something not kosher in the mix, once you put it into the water that makes a Slurpee, it's going to be nullified. But you're not allowed to nullify on purpose. So since here, the kosher market is large enough to care about in Melbourne, and they're going to want a share of the kosher market, so then that would be considered nullifying it on purpose. So therefore, they ruled that you can't buy them because we don't know what's in it. Sydney, unfortunately, had although a similar amount of Jews, but a much, much smaller kosher market. And they felt that the kosher market was insignificant enough that the franchises in Sydney didn't care about the kosher market. And therefore, if they were nullifying it, it wasn't for us, it was just how they're making it for themselves. And therefore, you were allowed to buy it. So, you know, it was like you can sip the Slurpee till you get to the border. And you got to throw it out the window. You know, it's that's how it goes. Yes.
It sounds
Well-
like it's all a financial aspect, what happened.
Well, in this case, it's financial because, as we said, if something gets, if a mistake, something non-kosher or whatever falls in by mistake, it can become nullified. But in this case, but you can't nullify something on purpose. It's only if it's happened to be. So here, the financial concerns make one situation as if it was nullified on purpose, and the other, since it wasn't a financial concern, it wasn't really a financial gain. Therefore, it was, at least from a Jewish perspective, was nullified on purpose. So, yeah, that can make the difference. Right. We got a little bit off the topic with that, but that's.
If anybody would like, I'm sorry, if anybody would like, I put in the chat a copy of a summary from Wikipedia on Muktzah, which certainly does not add anything to Rabbi Wernick. On the contrary, what it does is, for me, I found it helped me organize it to see written categories that he explained very, very well. You certainly can't rely on Wikipedia, you know, not yet. It's not like Rabbi Google yet, but I just thought it looked good. Halachically, it looked okay. It had enough warnings on it. And Rabbi Wernick and Rabbi Smith should not get too upset with me. But if anybody wants it, it's there.
Thank you very much. Well, it looks like we run out of time. So
I always love this class. I just
I'm
love
glad.
this class really a lot.
All
That
right,
was a very interesting story with Melbourne and Sydney. That was amazing.
right? Twist. It's like the
You'll never look
story.
at a Slurpee the same again, huh?
It's the story of the two Jews on the train in Europe. And one looks to the other and says, "Where do you come from?" He says, "I come from a little town, a shtetl, Lezhensk." Lezhensk? How many Jews are in Lezhensk? We have Kinahara, 125 Jews. Oh, and Goyim, how many Goyim? It's about 300 Goyim. Oh, okay, nice. And where are you from? I'm from Warsaw. Warsaw, how many Jews are in Warsaw? About 100,000 Jews are in Warsaw. 100,000 Jews give out. And how many Goyim are in Warsaw? About 2 million. 2 million. Tell me, what do you need so many Goyim for?
Well, lots of lights to turn on and off on Shabbos. So we'll wish everyone an
Shabbat
amazing
shalom.
week. Oh, you have a question? No? All right, wish everyone an amazing
Shalom
week.
לכולם.
Shabbat shalom, and we'll see everyone next week, God willing.
Like I said,
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Rabbi. Good Shabbos.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Stay safe, everybody.
Bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye.